Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Multifamily Chronicles. A long-waited guest we have today, Moshe Crane. Welcome to the show, Moshe.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Moshe is the Vice President of Branding and Strategic Initiatives at Sage Ventures. Moshe is also calling himself the most curious person in multifamily. Moshe, let's start with the most curious person in multifamily. Why the most curious?
When I started in the industry about a little over 5 years ago, the best thing that happened is I wasn't given a lot of a direction. And so I wanted to understand things and I would ask a lot of questions. And if I wasn't given an answer that made sense to me or whatever, I wasn't satisfied with that, I would go and search and find it myself. And I leaned into that. The more I try to figure things out, the more I understood and the better things got. So I just really leaned into that as my lane.
Let's talk a little bit about your multifamily journey. Just walk us through your journey. Tell us about how you started in the industry and how did you get to become the vice president of your company?
It's not the most exciting story. I started in commercial real estate, leasing office and warehouse space, and that was my intro to commercial real estate. And then I had a very long commute, and I started looking for something that was a little bit different. And I had a friend that worked for a supplier that I referred business to, and I ended up going there for a little while. And there, I had some multifamily clients, and I never thought that I would be in the multifamily space, but an opportunity to go back at Sage and work for an owner came up, and I thought that it would be, a pit stop. This was a way for me to get back into working for an owner, and that would lead to working for a bigger company with a bigger title. And once I got here and I started to discover all the nuances and the different variables of this, I'm going to call it a game of multifamily investing and operations, I became obsessed. And so I became hungry and I became curious, and it's been endless. There's so much to this game, and I'm here and making the most of it.
Moshe, what was your first position in multifamily? What was your job
I
title?
started I, s- I started as the director of leasing and marketing for Sage back in 2018. At the time, we had 1,800 units.
What are some things that help you get into your current position, vice president?
So I only got into this position in, I think, May or June of this year of 2023. Uh, I I run our LinkedIn page. So I was focused on, as the director of leasing and marketing, focused on property marketing. Marketing for the company came kind of natural for me, and running our LinkedIn page. And just over time, there was a lot of good things that happened from that. Our president would go to conferences, and people would come up to him and say, oh, I love what you guys are doing on LinkedIn. Or our director of acquisitions would go visit properties, and people will comment that they're paying attention to what Sage is doing on LinkedIn. Investors, friends of the owner, and all this time, all these people had no idea that it was me running it. And we've made hires based on people seeing what we're doing on LinkedIn and wanting to come join us. So the company wanted to as we've grown, we're now over 4,300 units, to expand that. We're really focused on creating a better experience. We're a work in progress. We're trying to create a better experience for our team and showcase that on LinkedIn. That's our strategy. So the better we are here, and the more, it's just opening a window for the market to see what we're doing over here. And it's been working. And then the strategy. So I was kind of boxed in a little bit into one lane, and they wanted to really lean into my curiosity and to trying to figure things out to make things better and more efficient. That's the strategic initiative part. So I work directly with the president, and where he gives me projects, or I come to him with different things that we can work on to help us be more efficient, to be better, different initiatives to, again, because we're a work in progress, and every day we're making progress in the right direction.
I want to go over LinkedIn and social media in just a minute, but before I go to those questions, um, I'd like to ask you, for someone that's at the very beginning, maybe they're a leasing agent or entry level in an industry, what are some pieces of advice that you could share with them about, if someone wants to move up and become a vice president just like you are today? What are some great pieces of advice? What are some things that you learn along your journey that you like to share with them to help them
So I
move up
actually I
in their career?
I started this series of posts. There's not a specific time when I do it, but I call them multifamily career tips. And I think I'm up to number 5. But so here I'm doing that exactly. So, the first is confidence. People like confidence. And that's not being cocky. Confidence is different than that. And confidence is knowing your stuff and being confident. I mean, just let's break it down. So if you're a leasing agent, you could be confident in your leasing abilities, but if you just started a brand new property, you might not be so confident you know your way around the property, or you might not be so confident about the different elements of the property and the different floor plans. So the more you learn, the more you become comfortable with it, the more confident you'll be. So you should do the same thing with your sales skills and your leasing skills. Become more familiar with it. You'll become more confident that way. And there's many categories like that. The more you're familiar with how this business works and the real numbers, the more confident you will be when you have a piece to add, right? So leasing agents might push back, hey, our rents are too high. But when you have a better understanding of the whole system and you say, hey, this unit type hasn't leased in 30 days, or the last time at least at this rent at $1,500 and we're asking 1,750, that's very different than just saying our rents are too high. So the more you become familiar with every aspect of the business and every aspect that you do, the more confidence you have. So confidence is a huge thing, and people see through that. Like if uh, you give your take on something. I was actually part of like an executive peer group, uh, and on the call they were talking about how the importance of listening to the on-site teams, and it's totally true, and I get that 100%. The on-site teams also have to do a better job of expressing themselves and presenting their ideas, because just because you're on-site and you have a good take doesn't mean that you're doing a good job of speaking up or sharing your thoughts. If you think about a TEDx presentation, everybody's seen at least one TEDx. Imagine if that person didn't prepare the way they did, and they could be saying the same message, but without all that preparation and all the way they package it and deliver it, it's not the same. So I made that shift in my career where I felt I was sharing things that I felt weren't being heard or listened to, and it was a little frustrating. And then I took a step back and said, what can I do differently? There's 3 outcomes when you share something if somebody doesn't hear you. Number 1, it's a bad idea. Number 2, it's a good idea, but you did a bad job presenting it. Number 3, it's a good idea and you did a great job presenting it, and there's something blocking them from hearing you, or it's not possible. So 2 of the 3 scenarios, excuse me, are on the presenter. So our ego tells us, oh, it's not me that's doing it, it's them. They're not hearing me. So if we have that understanding, so confidence, being thorough in how you present things, understanding what can I do differently, how can I present, how can I communicate. Communication is a huge thing. How do you communicate what it is that they need, or it needs to be communicated, and so that people can hear it and understand it. um, I think you got to be hungry. My 3 core values are humble, hungry, smart. So humble is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. So the abilities, right? So in that example, if they don't hear you, so if I'm just thinking about myself, so then, oh, they're not hearing me. But if I'm humble, then it's, oh, maybe I'm not doing the best job of expressing that. What can I do differently? How can I help somebody else? How can I be a team player? So that's humble. Hungry is there's the curiosity. You got to want to get better. And there's a lot of people who are just stagnant. They just kind of coast and they go with the flow, and you got to be hungry to be better. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't be happy or satisfied where you are. You got to be hungry. and you can tell the difference between someone who's hungry and someone who's not. And smart is not intelligence, IQ. It's EQ. It's emotional intelligence. You have to be aware of how people perceive you, how you impact other people. If you're on site and you deal with anybody from corporate, how do people get promoted? There's a conference room and a bunch of people are sitting around a table and they have this open position and they'll say, hey, what does everybody think of this person? And they go around that room and you don't know how many interactions each person has had. So if you're that leasing agent or you're the assistant manager and you're wanting to be promoted, make sure all your experiences with anybody in your company is positive. I mean, I don't go on site nearly as much, but I go to a property and it amazes me. Like sometimes, like when someone doesn't even smile, like that's your that's the core of what you're doing. Like you're the front line, the first experience, and then you don't even smile when you're meeting people at your own on your own team. It's. Do you want to do more, or is that good?
Yeah, it's great, but you just started with confidence, right? So I want you to
Oh,
continue.
so humble, hungry, smart. Humble,
So
hungry, smart. You got to have those.
yeah, so you start with
Proactive.
you're talking about the your post series that you started. I'd like for you to
Yes.
share more if you would.
Yeah. Great attitude, right? Nobody wants to promote someone with a bad attitude. And I actually posted about this and someone kind of gave me pushback and said, you know, great attitude is not just there's reasons why people could be disgruntled. And there's valid reasons to get upset, but your attitude is how you respond to that. So somebody can be unfair to you, somebody could be rude to you, somebody could be who knows what, but it's up to us how we respond to that. And a good attitude is going to respond in a good way. And so you have the choice of how you respond to that. We all have things that go on in our personal life, and it's hard to separate that sometimes. But if your attitude is just like, and you're not self-aware, so self-awareness and that kind of goes, some of the stuff kind of blends together, but the EQ, the emotional intelligence, you got to be self-aware of how people perceive you and how you come off. And if you're dealing with something difficult, find a way to you know put it to the side, or that it doesn't. I mean, you don't want people walking into the office and feel a gray cloud over your head. And that's not minimizing or dismissing the thing that you're dealing with. You just have to find a way to not let it overcome who you are and what you're doing at your job, so you can show up and be your best and be an expert. Whatever it is that you do, be that expert. And to know if you are an expert is when people start to ask you questions about it. So if people aren't asking you for your advice or your take on something, so you could be the expert, but you're not very good at communicating what you know about that. And if people are asking, hey, what do you think about this? Or, there's a question, be like, oh, I need to ask that. Yeah, I need to ask Adrian about that. Then you've created a reputation for being the expert at that. And don't stop. Don't stop being the expert. You always want to be a better expert. And that's where you got to be curious and hungry to learn more.
Moshe, I want to go back to the story that you told us about you managing your company's LinkedIn page and your higher ups like getting praise for how well the page was ran. So, what are some things that matter when you build a company brand? What are some things that you use? I guess some tips for someone that wants to become a Moshe, wants to become like a person that handles a company brand. What are some things that really help you build and shape your company brand, your image in the virtual space for your company?
Well, one has to, I mean, this is my take. I'm sure that people who have more experience or more credentials to have a better take or a different take. But it starts with identifying what you want your brand to be. And so I went through this exercise really on my own. It'd be like, what message do we want the market to see from Sage? And so the primary focus is on future employees. So our message is like, this is what it's like to work here, and this is what we're all about. So I do posts about new hires. I never do posts about we're hiring. because I don't like that message, especially when that message is with a stock image. That doesn't say that you care about your people. I want people coming to us. So I post when we have new hires. I post when we have recognizing people on our team, if it's the employee of the month or some, we do like a property manager of the quarter or different milestones when somebody's promoted. So it's really about the team. I mix in there. Obviously, we're a real estate company and we have outside investors. We don't do any third party management. We're not selling anything, but I do some posts about our track record, about investments that we do, and details about that. Case studies, how we've done, so people can have an idea of what our portfolio looks like and what our deals look like. But we do a lot of company events. We do these quarterly training things. I just posted last week about we did the final quarter training for our leasing academy. So the person who took over for me, the director of leasing, Brandon Brown, he's been doing these events for the team, and we bring everybody together. And he put on a great academy, a great workshop for the team. So I post about that, and so people will see over time, they see these things coming up and they say, hey, my company doesn't do that, or hey, like that looks great, like you. And the other thing is, we want our team to feel like they're part of something bigger, because they are part of something bigger. It's not just the property that they work at. They are part of the leasing team, and they're part of Team Sage. And as we grow, we've had people move from one property to another property, even if it's not the next position, right? So we're doing our first ground up leasing came from a different property. It wasn't uh, a higher position, but that was a great opportunity for them to, when you're the only leasing specialist for a lease up, that's a lot of leasing to do. And they're winning for that. Like those are some good commissions coming their way for that. So, you got to figure out, like, what is your brand? What do you stand for? What are your values? And what's that message that you want to send to the world? So that's we're a lot of the lingo is we're a team. It's about showing off, people who are part of our team and that we're actually proud of, and we appreciate them. We acknowledge them. And we do events. We also do like fun events. We have in Q2 we go to a baseball game. Q3 we had a bowling event. And there's an energy, there's a vibe that you can feel, and I'm just trying to share that with the world. So people have to be strategic about what is their brand, what is that message that they want to be sharing. And then, I mean, my job is easy in the sense, like, we're doing this stuff, it's just documenting it and sharing it.
I picked up on something very, very interesting that you said. I don't like to post open positions. Why? I want you to talk to me about the why behind it. Why don't you want to post the open positions? And secondly, how do you get candidates? How do you get your leads for the open positions?
So last summer, I think it was, I had an intern for marketing, and the first thing that I had him do was I had the physical magazine for NMHC with the top 50, and I highlighted, like, I don't know, 10, 15 companies, and I said, look up these companies, and I want you to make a PowerPoint, go through their social, and make a presentation of examples that you like and examples if you don't like. And then he presented it to me. And one of the first things that he showed, he's like, one company, he's like, every third post is a now hiring and a stock image. And I said, wow, what message does that send? Right? If you keep posting like now hiring, what does that say? Like, does nobody want to stay there? And if you're using a stock image, you clearly don't care that much about your people. Like, that's the message. Maybe you do, but like, then you're just totally disconnected. But I don't think that's an accident if you're totally disconnected. So that's where that came from. We do have an in-house recruiter. We do post openings, on ZipRecruiter or on Indeed and different job boards, but we're not using LinkedIn. Sometimes teammates, people on the team will post about a job that we're trying to fill. Will we do something different in the future? Maybe, but right now, like, that's I don't. But I've had people, like, the real goal is like that. I see people who work for our competitors, other management companies in the market, and they have a lot of people who work for them that are following us. They might not comment, they might not like on our posts, but they're paying attention. And I could look at the analytics, I could see the companies that people where they work and who's engaging with their content and who's seeing it. So the idea is, we want to create a buzz, and we want to create a place where that people are reaching out to us, wanting to work here before there's an actual open position.
Moshe, labor shortages, are they a real issue? Are they a real challenge? Or is just a buzzword, or is just companies, I guess, finding an excuse for not having a very good hiring game? Is this a real issue, labor shortages? Is it a shortage of talent in our industry? And then how do we overcome that perceived challenge?
So I don't know what's going on in the whole country. I could just tell you, my experience locally. We're based in Baltimore. This is the Maryland and Virginia region, the Mid-Atlantic. And if we say, labor shortage, I would guess, my gut feeling is anybody who has an open position gets a lot of applications. How many of those are qualified and how successful are they at hiring? I don't know, but a labor shortage would be that there's nobody applying for the jobs. There would be nobody to the ability to select. So there are people who are looking for the jobs. There are a lot of applications. Now, some of those applications could be total spam for whatever reason. Whenever we post a maintenance position, we got a lot of engineers or techs outside of the country thinking it's some other type of job. But I wouldn't call it a shortage. I would say that there's a lot of challenges in recruiting talent and developing talent and hiring talent. I wouldn't call it a shortage. I would say people are struggling with that, but that there's not a shortage of people applying.
Very interesting take. Want to go back to branding a little bit, Moshe. You explain your strategy about branding, helping branding your company, building your company's brand. Let's talk about some personal branding. You're one of the most prominent individuals, professionals on LinkedIn in multifamily. And I want to ask you, is it important to be proactive in building your personal brand? In my personal opinion, your brand exists whether you want it or not. So if you're not making a conscientious decision to build your own, others will build it for you. Your brand is going to be what others are saying and thinking about you. So would that be an accurate statement?
I agree. I mean, just change the word brand to your reputation, and you have a reputation even if you're not online. What is your reputation, right? So I was talking about one should be humble, hungry, and smart. What do your colleagues think of you? How do they see you? What's your reputation with them? Are you that person that comes through? Are you a person who's a good communicator? Are you a person who's empathetic? Are you a person who gets the job done? Are you the one who's taking care of business? Are you proactive? Are you confident? All these different things. A person, it's really an exercise of wanting taking a benchmark. Who am I and where do I want to go? And then I think that people should be on LinkedIn. And the biggest mistake that people make is they think to benefit from LinkedIn, I have to create content. I've had several calls with people, and I just had one with somebody last week, I think, and I said, you could build your reputation by commenting on people's posts, right? You come in there, and I do this often. I'm trying to do it more, but the truth is, it's harder to do it when there's not such good content. When a lot of content, like, do an audit of what the content is. It's people posting pictures with their team or at a conference, or just showing that, like, that they did something or they're somewhere. But like, what am I supposed to do? Like, oh, that's cool. Like, you're using LinkedIn as like a professional Facebook. You're just showing what you did and where you were. But when people actually start having posts of value, like something about investing or something about operations or something about, that something can learn from. Like, I ask people, like, how many people are there in our multifamily industry that you're actually learning something from? And there's not, unfortunately, not too many. Now, a person can really stand out by putting thoughtful, intelligent comments on people's posts and engaging with them. So yeah, it comes down to like, what do you want your reputation to be? Who are you? What are you, I don't post anything about my personal life because I'm not, that's not, it has no, it doesn't play a part for me in my reputation. Like, what goes on in my personal life has nothing to do with what I'm doing here. Could I get a lot of likes and engagement if I would post personal pics? For sure. And everybody has to make their own judgment. And some people want their brand to be that they're a family guy or they're a family lady or whatever, and that's their choice. So, but what's the reputation that you want to be? And the worst is like if you're posting things about who you want to be online, and that's not consistent with who you are in real life.
So, a couple of questions here. Is it wrong for someone to post things about their personal life? That's the first question. Second question is quantity versus quality. There was a conversation that I had online just the other day. There were some back and forth comments, and someone was saying, the content has to be quality, right? And then I said, is there something wrong with like posting quite a few times a day, every day? And someone said, well, this is kind of like attention harvesting or like something of that nature. Is there a right or wrong here? Like, first of all, in saying things about your journey, about your personal life, like who you are outside of work, and secondly, what's your take on like quantity versus quality? Like, is it wrong if someone posts consistently, on a daily basis, let's say 3-4 times a day, every day?
There's no right or wrong. I try to take a stance of being non-judgmental. There's no right or wrong. I can make an observation or take out assessment, right? So I'm not assessing if something is right or wrong. I'll make an observation. So, okay, there's no right or wrong about posting about your personal life. Okay, let's just make an observation. Everybody who's posting on LinkedIn wants people to see that, right? You want impressions, you want engagement, whatever it is, you want people to see that. So when you're posting a personal picture or your family or whatever it might be, if you every time I post about operations or investment, I want people to see that. So again, there's no right or wrong. If you break it down, when I post my family, I'm using now my personal life or my family to get more impressions. Just saying it makes like, there's no judgment there. That's the observation. When you're doing that, that's what you're doing. So there's no right or wrong, and you have to do what your thing. So I'm not coming to LinkedIn to see people's family pictures. I'm not coming to LinkedIn to see any of that. Like I'm looking for more quality and more value to learn, to find people, to network. And if that's less appealing for me to network with someone who's doing that. I have people that I'm close with, good friends that do that, and there's no judgment. That's their that's their lane, and that's their choice. And yeah, there's no right or wrong. Now, in terms of quantity and if I think it's, I don't know exactly when, but it's pretty relative. It's relatively recent that I post almost daily, and a lot of people have this. You got to post daily. I think that's hurting a lot of people because they come in and they have this pressure to post and to do it a lot and consistently, and they end up posting a lot of stuff that I think, like, there's people that I just am not interested in seeing their content because it's just noise to me. I'm not there to see their motivational, fluffy, inspirational, or whatever it is. And someone, again, another example, I was talking to somebody and he did this whole post, and it was a story about him being at Costco and overhearing a father talking to a daughter. It was a cute story. It was a lesson in business, but that's not what I'm coming to LinkedIn for. So again, there's no judgment. That's not what I'm interested in. So if a person goes back to like, who's your target audience? Who do you want to see your posts? If you just want anybody to see your posts, so yeah, go ahead, find some viral clip from TikTok and post it on LinkedIn. Find, an inspirational thing and post it on it. Who's seeing that? Like, is that your goal or your intention, that just someone sees something and is inspired by it? Or is it building your reputation of who you want to be known for? Am I answering your question?
Yes, you are.
So a person has to figure out what works for them. So for me, I started off with like a system, like, okay, I'm going to do 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and this is what I'm going to post on those days. And then, then it just slowly started evolving. And, again, it wasn't like a decision like, oh, now I'm posting every day. And actually the truth is, I was traveling Monday, Tuesday, and I think that I might have missed Monday. What's today? Today's Wednesday. Yeah, I think I missed Monday. It was just because I was with, whatever. It was a very busy day, and I missed it. And I don't put. I'll be careful with what I'm saying here. I don't put a lot of thought into the time that I'm actually posting, but when the thing that I'm posting, I've been sitting on for a while. So like I just posted, was it yesterday, about being an expert. So it took me, less than 2 minutes. I did it on the fly, but the whole idea of being the expert and becoming more, and that you're the expert when people are asking you questions, that's something that's been marinating in my head all the time. And so when you're working on a lot and you're trying to go deep on different topics, it's not hard to post. It comes now. This is for me, like it comes naturally. I the post, I did it last, and for me, the less I care about the impression. Anybody who posts on LinkedIn and says they don't care about impressions or engagement is lying. But the less you care about it, the better. So I actually posted specifically late last night because in my mind, it's always been that's a bad time to post because there's less people on it and there's less ability for people to engage it. And I was like, I want to be true to that, like that I don't care. Because at first I was thinking, oh, I'll just wait till the morning. I was like, no, I don't care. I'm just going to post it. This is my thought. This is a good idea. Just post it and care less about it. And it worked. Like, a week ago, I almost never reposted. Repost never had good engagement. And I reposted somebody's thing just to kind of pump them up. And like it went wild. And it was like at the worst time. And so when you try to care less about those things and you just care more about putting something that's meaningful, that's been the best takeaway for me from LinkedIn. Like I did it. It's a networking party. Like, and how do you want to show up to the networking event? What do you want people to think about you when you're networking? I put myself out there because I figured that my strategy was more people would want to network with me, or more people would be willing to have a phone call if they kind of had a sense of who I am and what I think. For some people, it's like I become the X. Like they're less likely to want to talk to me because they don't like my thoughts, and that's okay. I'm not trying to be. I'm not here to make friends. I'm not here to win people over. I'm here to grow my career, and it happens by connecting with people. And listen, I did a post and I had a bunch of people who disagreed with me and messaged me like, hey, let's talk about it. And I had a quick chat about it. Like so the best thing for LinkedIn was it really forced me the intellectual challenge to really be clear on what I think about something and to be comfortable and confident to put it out there.
How about the benefits of being active on LinkedIn and building a high profile in an industry? Right, you're definitely a high profile person in multifamily. Most people that are on a platform in multifamily know about you. I'm talking about LinkedIn here. So what are some benefits of investing time in networking and putting some quality thoughts out there and just building a network? What are some benefits that you're seeing?
The first is that you hope not to need this benefit, but if you're in a position where you don't want to show up to LinkedIn once you're needing a job or you're needing something from it, right? It's sad when you see these people who are laid off and then they show up to LinkedIn, and then their whole brand becomes, oh, I was laid off and I need to find a job. The people who show up, however consistent they are, but they have this reputation of being good at a certain thing or certain qualities or whatever it is, if they find themselves in a position, listen, I got fired once, and in hindsight, it was great because I'm not afraid of that. And I think a lot of people in our industry, like there's some people who've been working for the same company for a long time. There's a huge fear if they would be laid off or they would be fired. They would have no idea what they would do. And that's not a good place to be. So, there's a huge benefit of building your network and do that when you're not at a point of when you're not open to work.
Definitely, I couldn't agree more with you here, Moshe. Next, I want to go in an area that's not really, I guess, in your wheelhouse, but I know that you have some passion about maintenance, right? And let's talk about the importance of maintenance in multifamily in a current context of raising interest rates, flooring interest rates. Of course, they're flooring, but they're not really. When you say flooring, to me, is like they're just kind of like bouncing about the same level, but these rates are going up, right? A lot of investors purchase assets with variable interest rates, and they're feeling the pain in a big way, right? Rents are not growing at the same rate as they were like 2 or 3 years ago. So between rents not growing as fast as I guess they were hoping to, interest rates going up, their payments, monthly payments doubling or tripling. The only other area where you see opportunities is expenses, right? And how do you control better expenses? Maybe reduce your expenses. What's the most controllable expense in multifamily is maintenance related expenses. So given this picture, how do you see the importance of maintenance teams in a current environment, economical environment, and where do you see the importance of maintenance going into the future in the next like 1, 3, 5 years?
This is a loaded question. Let's break this up into segments. So let's start with what's going on in the current market and how did we get here? So I believe that from COVID to mid 2022, occupancy was artificially high. There was a lot of markets where they're either behind or evictions were paused for a long time. There were a lot of there was a lot of money that was pumped into the system with, residents not paying their own rent, somebody else paying for it, the assistance that kind of skewed things. And then you had a huge uptick in rental fraud. So people moving in and it's not who they say they are and not paying rent. And so that suffocated the supply. And so when there was a limited supply, it caused rents to skyrocket. Now, during that same period of time, interest rates went down, right? So 2020, right, COVID happened, sales like fell off, right? There were so many unknowns. Nobody wants to transact in this environment. It also happened to be an election year and a wild election year. How much of that plays a factor in? I haven't done enough research on that, but whatever it was, sales volume like fell off the cliff. As soon as I think it was really like the end of 2020, interest rates are low and sales 2021 and the first half of 2022, sales was skyrocketed. Now, people who are buying in those environments are using crazy high occupancy and crazy high rent growth in their underwriting and their expectation and their business model. And as you know, renewals are done 3 to 4 months before the lease expiration. So it really hit me in August of 2022 that when rents are the absolute highest in almost every market that they've ever been, and they're probably 20% higher than they were 2 years ago, in some places 30% higher. And they're using that for the renewals for the winter. And everybody would say, well, of course we could give them these big rents. Like, where are they going to go? And my mentality is like, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. And don't be too greedy. And like, it just like, I don't know where they're going to go, but it's not sustainable. And all the data that I look at is occupancy and rents have been basically dropping since the Q3 2022. And it hit me that people narrow in on value and pushing the rents. And most of the time, you're operating with cash flow. Yes, you could come in and let's give a hypothetical situation. You buy a property that has a lot of vacancy or rents are really low and in a 200 units, and you could come in and have like no cash flow for a year and a half or even 2 years. And you could come and flip that property and sell it for like double. Okay. That's not the majority of the market. That's not the majority of people who are doing this game. But too many people obsess with, oh, always wanting to raise the rents to raise the value. At the end of the day, the value of the property is your NOI. And if you're spending a ton on capex and you're spending a ton on your concessions and you have vacancy loss and all sorts of things, your NOI and your cash flow are going to hurt if your delinquency is bad, right? So you chase these high rents, but if the residents aren't paying that rent or you have fraud, like at the end of the day, that doesn't make your property more valuable. Are there exceptions where you have, let's say, a very small property, or you have, you're trying to do this flip, or you have a refi? Right now, you should not be trying to refi. So, like for the most of the time, people become like that. That shouldn't be your strategy. You have to have a strategy. But okay, so we had a lot of people who are overpaying for property, and they're trying to achieve like these historically high rent growth, and it just is not working. And so I've become extremely obsessed with efficiency. Like what you have a resident that's paying $1,500, and let's say you say the market rent is $1,750, even if nobody ever paid that, but you want to give them a $250 renewal, and you're thinking, hey, well, if they leave, that's fine because I'll replace it with someone who's paying $250 more. Yes, you'll always have exceptions. It depends on your strategy, but like if you have great retention, like just giving them a 3 or even a 5% increase, there's no vacancy loss, there's no turn cost, right? If you have a high amount of turnover, not only is your cash flow bad, but you're straining your maintenance. If you have to from an investment standpoint, you want to look at your return on investment, right? If you increase the rent 5% and it costs you $0, because there's no vacancy loss, there's no concession, there's no turn cost. Like that's a great return on $0. And then when you calculate your all the expenses, your vacancy loss and a turn cost, and the whole whatever expense you have for a new lease to get $200, like what's the return on that? And a cash flow it could. So I became really obsessed with like tracking this, the vacancy loss and concessions and turn expense, and I did this exercise a year ago where I analyzed all of our properties, and the properties that had the highest rent growth, lease charge growth, revenue growth had a lot of common denominators. They had the lowest turnover, they maintained the highest occupancy, they had the lowest vacancy loss, they had the lowest concession expense, they had the lowest turn expense, and their lease charges and their revenue was the highest growth, and I could calculate that percentage. So that's where it started from. And so you have to really be
I
strategic and
like
look at.
I'll just like to stop you for a second, if you don't mind. Just play the devil advocate here for a second. And I'll take the other scenario to where you said 250 rent increase, right? The thought here, I think, is not just that we're going to get so much more rent increase, but that rent increase is going to be forever. Thinking that, inflation, like how many times did we experience in a recent history that the rents went down versus up? So due to inflation, due to maybe for the most part a low inventory, the rates are not gonna ever go up. So this 250 a month, it's like a gain forever for the remaining of our ownership for the property. So what do you say? How do you overcome that argument?
Well, a person has to know their strategy and be disciplined. So if you have this person who's paying $1,500 and you want to, instead of giving a 5% increase, let's get the person to 1750. That's okay. I get that, because now that rent is always going to be at 1750. But if you're doing that same thing the next time around, then right, if you have one resident, here's the scenario: $1,500 year one, year two they increase 5%, no vacancy loss, no turn cost, and then now they've been there 24 months, right? And then you increase, we'll just round it to $50. So after year one, they go to 1550, and after year two, they go to 1600, right? And then a different unit, the person comes in at 1500. After 12 months, they're gone, and you have 30 days of vacancy loss, and then you replace it with someone paying 1750. If at the end of that 12 months, that 24 period, if that person leaves again, and you replace it with another person, let's just say you keep that rent at 1750. If you do, like, just look at the numbers over 36 months, your return on the 1500 to 1550 to 1600 is going to be much better than that rent that has turnover every 12 months at that higher rent.
Fair enough.
Now, if the person says, okay, so this is our strategy now, okay, and listen, I'm not against raising rents. Like, we're in a business to make more money. Now, when you have higher retention, I'm only talking on your renewals here. So if I get to 1500, 1550, right, and I have very few people moving out, I don't need to do a lot of leasing. It's a lot easier to get those higher rents, right? I experienced this. We bought a property right before I joined, 400 unit property, and rents were like 1,000. We were renovating and getting like 1350, but we were being aggressive on the renewals, and it was just a revolving door. We couldn't move the occupancy, and then we made a shift. It was, okay, let's get our occupancy up to 95 or whatever, or the number goal that we had, and now we're going to change our. And so people would say, hey, but why should we change that if people are paying 1350? Yeah, but it's different when you're asking 1350 and you have 50 units to lease than if you have 10 units to lease. And if that rent was so good, like, we would fill up quickly. There's not enough people in the market at that moment that are willing to pay that, or they were, just we would have to wait a long time. But we did a lot better when we made that shift, and we maintained the people who are good paying residents, even if they had below market rents, or even if we could renovate their unit and get somebody higher. We shifted. You don't have to do that all at one time. And that has been one of our best performing properties since we made that shift. And you see a lot of people who come in and want to renovate every unit all at once. You don't take a community that rents are $1,000 and turn over the whole community in 24 months. Now everybody's paying $1,500. It just,
Well,
it just, I mean, obviously, if you have like 100 units, that's different. But if you're talking about a 300, 400 unit thing, it doesn't happen overnight or in that quick, because a lot of people know about that community, and it doesn't just change like overnight that, oh, this is, it's a new owner and they're renovating. And that means there's this huge demand for $1,500 rents.
what you're describing here is repositioning the asset, right? Am I saying this correctly? Repositioning, which is not just increasing rates, is basically moving everybody out, or like, a huge percentage of your current residents, and bringing residents that can afford that higher rent, that new rent that you're bringing in. So repositioning is not just like increasing rents. There's a lot more than that. Do you disagree?
Yeah, I had an owner in our market call me because they bought a large property, and they did this. They wanted to do all the renovations at once, and they got down to like 50% occupancy. And I was like, listen, that's your strategy. That's your strategy. Like, from a leasing thing, strategy, it's really hard for you to fill that place up really quickly once you have all those units renovated. I would rather do that slowly.
Oh,
So again, yes, and you could have exceptions to this, and there could be different tax benefits and different things where the finances are, if you have a certain type of loan or but this idea of coming in, pumping a ton of money into the property and repositioning and flipping it, in a short amount of time, in my experience, it's especially in what's going on now is a mistake in most cases.
I like to
But
pick
again,
up.
the proof is in the pudding. Like, if they're getting a fantastic return, like, show me, and I'll shut up and take that to the bank all day long.
I like to go back where we left off, right? Where you were explaining the context, bringing it to the current day,
Sorry, can I,
right?
before we move on, I just want to emphasize, like, my thought is not theoretical. Like, I'm not trying to convince somebody a better philosophy. It's based on which of our properties are performing the best. Money in the bank, return to investors, what is having the best return. So again, if somebody else has a different theory and it's working, show me the money, and I'm happy. Like, I'm not trying. It's not about being right. It's about what is producing the best result.
No.
Okay, sorry.
Just trying to look at something from different angles. I think that's where a lot of value could come in. It's not about who's right or who's wrong. I agree with you. So going back to what we're talking about, and you were explaining how things happen with, overvalued properties, low inventory, COVID, no transactions, rents keep going up, and all of a sudden things change, right? They can't. I mean, everything changed. The elections came in. They played a big role. No matter, we're not talking about politics, but from an economical standpoint, like where we are today in 2023 versus where we were in 2020 before the elections are like two different worlds, right? From an economical standpoint, and this is not playing politics. It's just like a matter of fact, right? A matter of fact. So in a current environment, like, please describe, what you're seeing macro, and how could maintenance teams play a role into, like, helping the assets perform at the best way they could.
So, so in my previous role as director of marketing, so I became obsessed with these numbers, right? I became obsessed with revenue and not just the rent, right? An increase of the trade up, but like looking at the full thing. And there's so many parts to it. Again, it's not just achieving high rents. You want to have lower expenses. That's how your NOI goes up, right? The more your income is over your expenses, the more money that you're making and the better you're producing. So I became more obsessed with these nuances and these expenses, and now I'm working on a. I'll be happy to show you if you're interested, but I'm working on this whole report. Like, and again, it's not sophisticated. It's pretty simple. But you take, a given T12 has, I don't know, like 5 or 6 categories. You have your DOE, your daily operating expense. You have your general admin. You have your payroll. You have your tax license and insurance, and you have a CapEx and utilities and contracts. Sorry, it's like 7 or 8. And so let's put all that into a spreadsheet and let's compare how we're doing this year versus last year, right? And when you could visualize this, so I have these nice lines and graphs to show, like, hey, there's some areas where, like, everybody thinks expenses are up everywhere. I actually have properties that are doing better, like they're spending less on their DOE than they were last year. And then the best part is if I take another workbook and I have the whole portfolio. So I can see, hey, on a portfolio level, what's the difference between, our utilities are higher. Okay, now let's dive into that, right? So again, because you said, what can you control, what you can't control? I can't control the taxes, licenses, insurance. Like whatever I want to do, I have no control of that. Okay, but my daily operating expenses, I do have a little bit of control because you know what's included in my daily operating expenses? My turns, right? So if I have less turnover, I'm being spend less on my daily operating expenses. If I have my contracts, right? If right, you're talking about purchasing. So am I doing the same? Am I getting the best pricing, right? If so, we're in one region, right? So we need to be more strategic and review all the suppliers that we're working with. Who's paying, and then you have this formula where it's each property. What am I spending per unit on this? And then when you line that up, and you say, hey, this property's, the expenses are 1,000 per unit and this one's 600. Like, what's going on here, right? Some of it, an easy one, I figured out which property very easily has the highest taxes and insurance. And so, okay, I can't control that, but I can look at my contracts and say, like, if you're using the same landscaper or trash or whatever, that's a lot more controllable, and you can be more strategic about streamlining your purchasing, and can I get one landscaper to do all of this or one trash company to do all this, and how much can I save? And when you start looking at utilities, like, why are my utilities going up? My vacancy loss is higher and I have more vacant units that the utilities are in our name. Is that driving the utility expense? Is it something else? So it's very hard to do any of these things when you don't even have a starting point to look at. And so as I put this together, it tells a story, and it's like, hey, is payroll up? Is payroll down? Payroll, I could argue, is actually something that could be a little more controllable. So I'm hesitating to use the C word because it has so many different meanings for everybody. But if we'll leave it for another episode. But yeah, but the whole movement of centralized is how can I do things more efficiently where I can actually lower some of my expenses.
Moshe, I'd like to get your thoughts on prop tech. What are your thoughts on the current landscaping when it comes to prop tech technology in multifamily, and where do you see the prop tech environment going? I was just at prop tech like 3 weeks ago. I was a participant in a conference, and we had 70% vendors, prop tech mainly vendors, and 30% operation people. So there's just so much product. There's so many offers out there, and I don't think that all of them are gonna survive. This next like 12, 18, 24 months, and it's very hard also having such a wide offer for an operator to pick and choose their tech stack. They probably already have like a huge tech stack to begin with. They have to weed out and then see what makes sense. A lot of overlap in between tech. So I just like throw a lot of stuff at you right here. Just tell me your thoughts on the current environment and where do you see we're heading prop tech wise.
So let's create the context. This is my take of the context of prop tech is that you had the most essential part of an operation for the tech right now is your property management software for accounting purposes, for all sorts of. So you have all the big players that some have been around longer: Yardi, MRI, RealPage, Entrada, Resman. I don't want anybody to get upset for me leaving them out, but you have those companies, and there is sometimes some cases it's in all cases it's true. It is easier to get a service all in one spot. So you had these companies that started acquiring other services, other tech companies, right? So we're the property management software, and our clients need a screening service, or they need an insurance service, or they need the utility server, or whatever the service might be, and says, "Hey, we already have them. That's their. I'll use that. That's your core operating system." So people feel chained to that. Again, whether they should or shouldn't is not for now, but that's my gut feeling that a lot of people feel that way. And so those companies go out and say, "Hey, what other services could we bring in here? Because we already have the client chained to us, and let's offer more." And so it's not a bad thought. The problem is when the different companies they're bringing in is the quality is low. And so because of that, there were a lot of categories that were created because the property management softwares were not offering great options for that. CRM is an example. CRM has become its own category because the property management softwares were not doing a great job of that. Entrada intrigues me because they were, as far as I know, were the first and only that wasn't acquiring anybody. They were building everything in-house. Now, with their recent acquisition of Rent Dynamics, will we see more? I don't know, but I would venture to guess that they're probably going to make more acquisitions, and they kind of lost that brand of being that's not necessarily. I'm just making an observation, no judgment there. So you have all these things. Now there is a paradox. Like you have these tech companies who come in and say, "Hey, how could we let's create something. Let's get grow as much as we can so that we become appealing for one of these larger companies to acquire us and join." Is that whole thing good for the industry? There are things that are good for it. There's things that are very bad for it because you have people who are coming in trying to create a product. Just listen, there's no judgment in what you do to make your money and find your success, but I can make an observation that there are products that have been built up and were acquired, and that specific scenario wasn't great for the industry and for the clients. And I think that a lot of when people are looking at their prop tech, they should definitely be considering is this a company that could be acquired, and that creates a whole unknown when they get acquired, or someone who's not going to be acquired. Now, as a buyer, it's a lot easier to wrap my head around someone who's doing one thing. But for some things, it is a lot better if they're doing more. So there is this paradox, like, start out, very niche, very small, but go really deep. And once you win a certain place, then you could go wider. People who come out of the gate because it becomes a distraction, like, oh, you do X, Y, Z. Like, I can't even wrap my head around all the different things that you do. So there is this challenge and a paradox of people are doing that. But if you can find your Trojan horse and you can find one niche that you could get in and people love what you do, going wider becomes a lot easier. And I think that there is that going wider solves, like I explained in my experience, the initial, right? You had the property management softwares and they're bringing more things in. So as long as you're disciplined and you don't sacrifice on your quality and you're really trying to add value versus what are things that we could just bring in to generate more revenue, buying revenue, having that good balance, and don't make a mistake that some of these larger companies have made and some of the things that they've acquired that, in my opinion, don't necessarily add value. So there's a lot of space for people to come in, niche with something, and really build up the user base there, and then build off of that. And then that solves a lot because people are tired of the 50 different logins that they have and the 50 different things that they're doing.
Moshe Crane, an hour is not enough to ask you all the questions that I have. Probably we should do a series, of course. You're a very busy man, so I'm not sure when I'm gonna get you next time. But for right now, any closing thoughts? Any thoughts in closing of our current conversation?
I think that people should. I'll recommend a book, and the book is by Adam Grant called Think Again. And the book is about this idea of rethinking how you think about things. And you learn something once, right? You come into this industry and you learn something, and then you didn't want to change that, and that's okay. But if you do the exercise and say, hey, does that actually make sense? Is that the best thing? Really, like, reestablish what you believe. And the second part of the book is where don't accept everything that you hear, right? Somebody says something, okay, I'll take that. I now be curious, is that actually true? Or what do I actually think about that? And do your own exercise. Don't be a headline reader. Don't read some headline and says, residents want this. Question, who is it coming from? Does that actually make sense to you? And go verify and then come up with your own thought process. So if you're needing help with that, I think Again is a great book to start with, to train yourself to rethink what you think and not accepting everything that you hear and coming up with your own idea about it.
Moshe Crane, how can you be found? What are some ways to get in touch with you if someone from the audience wants to reach out?
I'm really hard to find, but if you happen to be on LinkedIn, I'm pretty easy to find there.
Moshe, I truly appreciate the conversation. I really enjoy our chat today. I hope to get you back here soon. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to be here at
Thank you, Adrian.
Chronicles.
I'm glad we finally did this. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope we could do it again soon.
It sounds good. Let me know.
Everybody, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for taking an hour out of your busy day to be here with Moshe and I. I hope to see you back here soon. I'm Adrian Daniela, your host, and this is Multifamily Chronicles. Have a great day.